I want to talk about the Giannis trade, but instead of going through all the teams that could put together trade packages for him, I'd like to zoom out and talk about superstar trades in general, because I think in a lot of ways, going through all of those mock trades is largely pointless because if he's forcing a trade and Milwaukee is willing to accommodate him at least somewhat, then we're not talking about who has the best package they could offer. It's gonna be up to Giannis. I want to talk about superstar trades in general because I personally do not want to be a buyer in a superstar trade. Look back the last 10, 15 years where teams are including multiple firsts and swaps in these trades. They almost never work out. The only example I could think of that actually worked out was the Anthony Davis trade to the Lakers. But most of the time in these situations, the teams give up all of their flexibility and thou shall value flexibility. I'm seeing all the chatter online, and it's very common cliche that, you know, who cares about these picks? They're going to land in the 20s because your team is going to be so good. You have no shot at drafting anybody nearly as good as Giannis. The young players on your team, almost zero chance any of them will turn into Giannis. The whole point of this whole thing is to acquire players like Giannis. In order to win a championship, you need a player like Giannis. That's always the story, and they criticize teams for hanging on to their young players and picks too much, for drawing the line and saying, no, you can't have Dylan Harper. And to a lot of fans and media members, that seems ridiculous to draw the line at a 19-year-old when you're looking at Giannis, who's a top 3, top 4 player in the world. But those people are misunderstanding what the draft picks are. Draft picks are currency. They're liquidity. They are resilience. They allow you to buy things. And I would argue that teams that win championships, they're not always the team with the highest ceiling. They're the team with the fewest amount of weaknesses, though. And when you make a superstar trade for a guy like Giannis and you give up tons of your liquidity, you lock into a roster where pretty much all of your additions from here on out, you're either breaking up an existing piece on your roster into multiple smaller ones in order to add depth, or you're stuck in the buyout market. You're signing veterans to minimums who are hoping for a deep playoff run. But when you're in that position, you're not making targeted acquisitions. You're taking whatever you could get to fill in the roster around your top-end talent. You're pairing Giannis with another superstar, and you're saying, look at our top-end talent. Nobody can compete with us. All we have to do is cobble together a rotation. We don't need draft picks. We don't need young players. There will be players willing to sign with us, and this will be great. But teams like that have holes. And the deeper you go in the playoffs, your opponents are smarter and more talented, and the coaching is better. They're going to expose those holes, and then you're going to go into the offseason saying, we have to get more shooting. We have to get more rebounding or perimeter defense, whatever the need is. You don't have anything to go get it. You can't pinpoint a player that would fit well in your team and say, we're going to go acquire them. You're stuck taking whoever you can get. That's what draft picks are. They're currency. They allow you to buy things. It's a lot easier to buy something than to barter and try to find someone who wants something you already have. Everybody likes picks because of their potential. In fact, once you actually draft somebody with those picks, the value goes down immediately because now it's a tangible asset. It's not this intangible thing. Draft picks are far more valuable than they get credit for in trade discussions. You see in some of these trades, the Desmond Bane trade, here's 4 firsts because we want to add a starter. Same with Mikal Bridges, here's 5 firsts. Wouldn't both of those teams love to have those picks back right now? The KD trade robbed them of all their flexibility. I mean, they gave away the rest in the Bradley Beal trade. That one was even worse. But point is, they built the team. They realized that they needed more. It wasn't quite working. It just turned into a mess quickly because they had very few options. And then you end up in a place where you've hit a wall, and now you have to trade Durant. In fact, the Bucks are in that place. They hit a wall, and they have to trade a 30-year-old superstar because they literally have nothing left they can do. Unbelievable to allow yourself to hit that wall when you have a player like Giannis who's only 30 years old. It's not about drafting a superstar with those picks. It's about allowing you to buy solutions when needs arise. And in order to make playoff runs year after year, things are going to change. Players will age and they'll fall off a bit. Someone is due for a contract and they're too expensive, and so you need to trade them or let them walk and find a way to replace them. Everything is moving all the time. And picks and tradable assets, but especially picks, allow you to fill those holes and continue to modify as you go. And that's what really keeps the title window open. And so when teams have no picks, they become very brittle. You expose weaknesses on their team, they have no way of addressing that. So I'm all for acquiring Giannis, as long as it doesn't empty the coffers with everything you could use to build around him, especially a player like Giannis, who's not a great outside shooter. He needs shooting around him. We've only seen him with the stretch five. I personally would love to see him move to the center position as he goes into his 30s and start playing inside much more in order to reduce that need to have him play with the stretch five, because they're not easy to find. What if he gets traded to the New York Knicks, for example, which seems to be the most likely destination because word is that's where he wants to go. And if Milwaukee's going to accommodate him, then that's the team that's going to make it happen. And word is that Karl Anthony Towns is the guy involved in that trade. Let's say you do Karl Anthony Towns, a few other players, all of your remaining swaps, your 2026 first, just whatever you have left. Now you have Giannis. I presume you're going to start Mitchell Robinson. That's not a great fit. So then what happens when you say, you know what we need is a stretch five? What do you have to go get that person? Smart teams build for resilience. They don't build to maximize their ceiling. I think that's a big misconception in the basketball community, is that the ceiling is what wins the championship. It's a lack of weakness that wins the championship. This is why I hate all-in trades. And it's funny, teams will get praised for going all in. They'll say, oh, good for them for going and getting their guy. They're going for it. The people that give them that praise are going to be the first people to clown on that franchise and trash them years later when they have nothing they can do. And they're stuck in a position where they have to blow it up and rebuild. 3-4 years later. It just happened to the Suns. Look at the Clippers. When they acquired Kawhi, people loved that move. They said, look at the Clippers being aggressive. Good for them, going out and getting Kawhi and Paul George. Who cares about these picks? They'll fall in the 20s. SGA is only 20. He'll never be as good as Kawhi. One of those picks ended up being Jalen Williams. This pick coming up next year, the Clippers have one of the worst records in the league, and they owe their pick to OKC. Those same people that were praising the Clippers for making that deal are the ones today saying they ruined the NBA by giving the best team in the league all of these picks. A team that may win the championship and have a top 3 pick in the following draft. Teams are the ones that have to suffer the consequences of these moves when they leave themselves with no options, no outs, especially when you're acquiring players in their 30s. Who at some point are going to start to tail off. Who knows how long Giannis is going to be a top player in the world. You go back and look at all the trades involving multiple picks, I would argue that almost all of the teams that made those trades would take it back if they could. I want to touch on the Spurs because that's the team that is causing the most debate, because the Spurs drew the line at Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle, said, nope, they're untouchable. And everyone's making fun of them, saying, is Giannis underrated because the Spurs won't trade Dylan Harper? The Spurs don't operate like every NBA franchise. Other franchises see it as just a talent collection game. Who can collect the most talent? And that's the team that wins. The Spurs operate a program. They are targeting specific players that they want to bring in. They aren't just grabbing any player that they can with the picks and assets and, oh, how can we trade these things for something more valuable? They are very deliberate and methodical in the way that they build their team because they're operating a program. They have specific players with specific personalities and mindsets, and it all fits into their culture. They have a brand. They know what they're doing. They've been doing this for years. So when you're asking them to trade Dylan Harper or Stephon Castle, you're asking them to trade their way of doing business, their program. It's not just the one player. They have Wemby, who's 21 years old. Stephon Castle is 20. And Dylan Harper's 19. They have their trio, complementary trio, all on the same timeline, ready to build for the next 10 plus years. At least that's what they're planning. Whether they'll be able to or not, who knows? But why would they give that up? Their team looks great. They don't need to win the title this year. They're not desperate. They know what they're doing. They're not going to abandon their formula for any player. They have a system they're operating. They're not giving that up for anybody. Those three guys are going to be in San Antonio for a long time. So I want to just lastly touch on the Knicks because I do think it's going to end up being them. They went out and got Mikal Bridges and gave up 5 picks because they saw him as the final piece for their starting 5. And now we're going to say that their starting 5's not good enough? You know, teams have to have conviction in what they're building. You don't just leap at the first thing that becomes available. You do have to be opportunistic, sure. And a chance to acquire Giannis is unique and special, but not if it costs you everything. Not if it costs you your ability to adjust. Something's going to go wrong in a way that you don't see coming. What's that old saying? The things that cause you the most stress in life are the things you never saw coming. That's true in the NBA too. If you don't have draft picks, you can't do anything to adjust to those things that are inevitably going to happen. I want to close on a dark horse for Giannis because I love this idea. Portland has come out of the woodwork as a potential landing spot. Now, it doesn't make much sense why Giannis would want to play there from a championship contention perspective. But from Milwaukee's perspective, that's the team I want to trade with. I'll grab Scoot Henderson, maybe Shaedon Sharpe instead, one of those two. They have cap filler in Jeremy Grant and Robert Williams. They can give me my picks back from the Dame Lillard trade so I can actually tank. I get my swaps and my picks back and tank for the next few years. Giannis gets to go play with his buddies Drew Holiday and Dame Lillard and have a starting lineup with Denny Avdia, Donovan Clingan. That's pretty good going into next season with that lineup. I don't know. I hadn't thought of it, but it's pretty clever. It's got to be the place that Milwaukee would love to trade with the most. We'll see if Milwaukee does what they want to do or what Giannis wants to do. That's a dark horse. I'll be surprised, but it makes a lot of sense. So we'll see. And we'll see what this trade ends up ultimately being, how many assets it's going to cost to get Giannis. But man, if there's a team that gives up everything they had left and leaves themselves with no recourse to do anything with their roster other than minimum veterans and buyout guys, stuff like that, good luck.